18th. Hey, how are you doing? It's Miguel. The 18th of December is today, 2018. Welcome to my live webcast. And I'm going to change the camera just a little bit. All right, that looks better for me. All right, so you might have noticed that the title of this broadcast is Fatherly Advice. Happiness is generated by workouts and bright sunlight, and it's not dependent on external events. And I think it's really important to sort of understand this. It's true that I am a real advocate of psychology. I think about psychology all the time. I think psychology is important. And having I think a basis for understanding a solid foundation of psychological knowledge is essential for living a happy, meaningful, fulfilled life. And I use psychological principles every day. And but I'm also aware of the limitations of psychology. And psychology can go a long way toward helping you to develop happiness, particularly cognitive behavioral therapy is essentially the way to achieve happiness. If you're interested in using psychology to help get you happier, CBT is the way to do it. And there are other related therapies that also are quite helpful. Therapies such as acceptance and commitment therapy. And I could just go on and on and on. And these are all what I'd call adjuncts to happiness. They really are very helpful in helping a person be happy. But there's another significant avenue toward gaining happiness. And it has to do with simply just the biological underpinnings of happiness. Ensuring that those biological underpinnings are there is also essential. In fact, in my view, it might even be more essential. That's right, more essential than psychology. And it's biology, which, at least from a physical standpoint, there's psychology. Basically everything starts out at physics. And then one higher level of abstraction is chemistry. And then at a higher level of abstraction than that is biology. And then at a higher level of abstraction is psychology. And then, we get up to sociology and politics, right? And then maybe philosophy at the top. Who knows? Who knows what the ladder is, the ladder of experience. But so while psychology is very important, it has underpinnings in biology. And so you've got to, if you want to be happier, one of the most essential things you've got to do is understand your body and how your body can support your own happiness. And of course, in general, and I'm making assumptions about what things are in place. And of course, you've got to have when it comes to biology, there are things that have to be in place that are prior to happiness. For example, your safety. You've got to have solid nutrition. Things like this, you maybe not ought to be terribly injured, recovering from some kind of terrible injury, but so long as those assumptions, for all intents and purposes, generally, if you want to maintain or support your happiness the most as a human being, you need two things, and that is exercise and bright sunlight. Now, when I say, let me talk briefly about exercise and bright sunlight. So now here's the thing about being happy. Being happy takes energy. There's no such thing as like well, I guess there is such thing as a person who's happy and has no energy. But energy is a strong requirement for being happy. Um, in a way, energy gives you the ability to cope with the problems of life. Energy and your ability to bounce back from failure or bounce back from any kind of problem, it requires energy. Your ability to stand up after defeat, and it requires physical energy to do that. And you get that energy from workouts. And what I mean workouts, you don't have to go to the gym necessarily, but walking long distances, walking for hours and hours on end, and or exercising regularly, exercising every other day or even daily would be great. These are ways that you can support your body's happiness factors, whatever. I guess what I'm talking about is that when you work out, you create resilience in your physical body. You create energy, and it's this energy which your brain uses to create neurotransmitters, right? Neurotransmitters, and I don't know, that helps you be happy. For some reason, walking and workouts and even bright light. Now, when I say bright light, I don't necessarily mean you have to stare into the sun. And in fact, when I go outside, I generally always wear sunscreen because I want to protect my skin. The sunlight I'm talking about, what makes it important is that the sunlight is sort of goes into your eye, and your retina sort of notices and has long exposure to bright sunlight. For some reason, there's something about sunlight and serotonin. Think of seasonal affective disorder, SAD, how people who are not exposed to bright sunlight are sometimes they get depressed. And I personally have experienced it a little bit. I think that, and here's what I'm really getting at. It has a lot to do with our ancestry, our biological evolution. Humans, as they developed over time, they were outside a lot, and they got a lot of exercise. They did a lot of walking. They were physical throughout the day. And our human body has developed to accept and appreciate and enjoy this kind of energetic way of life, this energetic lifestyle where we're always, basically outside and doing work. And that's what these workouts and the walking is meant to mimic. And also, when you're outdoors, the sun is constantly around you, and it's bright outside. In fact, even on a cloudy day outside, if it's still bright, it's still amazingly bright. And in fact, I think that today in our modern society, we live lives, we go from home to work and work to home, and we're commuting between those with a car. We don't get a lot of exercise. We don't get the exercise that our body needs, number one. And number two, we don't get the bright lights that our body needs. We're always under LED lights or fluorescent lights or even incandescent lights. And these light sources just are not bright enough. And they don't stimulate our retinas like they need to be stimulated to produce the serotonin. And so from a neurotransmitter standpoint, in fact, both of these biological inputs, that is exercise and sunlight, are essentially what they're doing is they are building the neurotransmitters that we need in our brain. And I could go into some of the neurotransmitters, but I'm not going to. But it's important to have the exercise and the sunlight. and with those things, with exercise and sunlight, I think that no matter what happens, the human psychology can be very resilient, and it actually doesn't matter what is happening in your external world. You have to remember too, as we evolved, we lived in very extreme conditions. Human beings, maybe they lived in small tribes, maybe they didn't have access to water, sometimes maybe they didn't have access to food. There were probably serious threats to their safety surrounding them in terms of disease and wildlife and just the elements like weather. I can imagine hurricanes and tornadoes and hail and rain. Human beings lived lives that were essentially on the edge. And even then we managed, I believe, to be generally happy and well adjusted. And we didn't even back then, we didn't even have the body of psychological knowledge that we have today. Right? Back then, if a person was able to get adequate nutrition intake, exercise a lot, and have access to bright sunlight, then they could live a happy life. And I still think that is the case. And again, let me stress, I don't necessarily mean that you're, in terms of when it comes to bright sunlight, that you're necessarily exposing your skin to lots of UV radiation, which is carcinogenic. What I'm suggesting is that you wear sunscreen. It's really only the eyes, the retinas that need the exposure to the bright sunlight. All right, so cool. So I think I've done a fairly adequate job of describing what's necessary for happiness, the biological underpinnings, and I briefly described some of the psychological underpinnings. But that's it. It's those things. And you know what? It's honestly, happiness is not dependent on one's external situation. Here's the reason why. The reason why is this idea related to projection. People are the source of every emotion that they emote. I talk about how we're always projecting. The material that's in our mind, we're projecting onto our external world. The external world gets meaning through our own thinking about it. The decisions we make, essentially, these are choices. Moment to moment, we're making choices. And yes, some of those choices have been conditioned in us by culture unconsciously. But they're choices nonetheless. We all have the freedom to make choices about the meaning that our external events make. This is why external events don't matter. It's because we choose the meaning of those external events. Here's an example. Let's say I'm going to give you this. Let's say I'm going to give you like a pencil. All right. And then I'm going to say, Emily, I want you to take this pencil, and when you accept it, I'm also going to give you $100. So here we go. I'm handing you the pencil. And oh, by the way, here's opening my wallet. Here's the $100. So, and now give me the pencil back. Okay. So my question is, how did you feel about accepting the pencil? Well, my guess is that since you knew that $100 was going to follow, that you would have gladly accepted the pencil, because the pencil in itself is quite neutral. Now, what if I associate the pencil with something else? Let's say let me give you a pencil, and right after I give you the pencil and you receive it, I'm going to kick you in the shin. So maybe you're not. Maybe you're not. Now, how do you? What is your view about the pencil now? The pencil might have a different meaning now. In fact, you probably might be reluctant to take the pencil because I've made an association um, of pain with the pencil. So it's not about the pencil. It's not a pen. It's about the meaning of the pencil, what the pencil might mean. The pencil might mean that you receive something of benefit, or the pencil might mean that you might receive some pain, something that's painful. And so that's the same is true with external events. Like, for example, a woman who's pregnant, say, has a baby, women walk away from childbirth with different interpretations of their experience. And a lot of it depends on their attitudes about the pregnancy and what's going to happen. They may have fears wrapped up around pregnancy, or they may have joys wrapped up around pregnancy. And even troubled pregnancies with complications, pregnancies that involve extensive surgeries or hospital stays, can be viewed from a woman's perspective as being amazing and wonderful and pleasant and meaningful in a positive way. And that is really only decided upon from a person's perspective, the attitude that they bring. And the reason is because human beings, we're able to create meaning out of anything. So, you might have heard this idea of how, I guess it's the meaning that we attach to events in our lives is up to us. And it goes really deep. It's really significant. Anyway, I guess that's my point. My point is that our lives are really a function of our own choices that we make moment to moment. And they're essentially decisions that we make about how to view the world. And the meaning we give to the world is completely our choice. And that's why external events don't matter. It's because we choose that. We choose the meaning that we overlay onto reality. That is what it's all about. And that's why happiness isn't dependent on external events. And because the meaning we overlay on our external reality is dependent on our biology, I think foremost dependent on our biology. That's why my focus, or at least I'm basically sort of talking about how biology can override psychology in many ways. Really the basis of our psychology is biology. And so long as you've got the biological stuff handled, I think the psychology stuff can manage itself. Mm-hmm. And the evidence I have for that is my understanding of our history as human beings, Homo sapiens. We somehow lived perfectly adequate lives in a world without antibiotics, right? In a world without medicine, in a world without relationship gurus or time management gurus, somehow we survived and thrived and flourished. And I think that that is still true. I think one of the problems that we have today is that uh, we're living lives that are very sedentary. That's a serious problem for our psychology. And I think the sedentary lifestyle and a lifestyle that is essentially dark, we don't get access to a lot of bright sunlight. That combination of a sedentary dark lifestyle is making a lot of people today depressed. And um, suicide levels are higher than they've ever been that I'm aware of. And what's interesting is that life today is better than it's ever been. Violent crime is down, lower than it was in the 1970s. Standard of living is up in terms of, everybody's got television sets, laptop computers, and smartphones, and cars. I know we're able to go from point A to point B faster than we ever have been able to go, more efficiently through airplanes and other modes of transportation. We've got vaccines that prevent people from getting sick. We've got excellent medical care. So these, our external environment these days are pretty amazing compared to where they were 100 years ago. Nearly everybody has indoor plumbing. We'll have access to microwaves. Clean food is important. And so how do you square this idea that everything's pretty much better than it ever has been, and then with this idea of suicide and how it's on the increase, and depression, and anxiety? All of these mental illnesses are on the increase. And I my explanation for it is that it's about how we are living our lives. Maybe it's we're eating a lot more calories than we ought to be eating per day. We're not getting the exercise we need. We're not outdoors experiencing the very bright light. And, we're choosing to stay indoors watching television and video games and eating poorly. And that's causing a lot of unhappiness right now. And for some. There are others who are really focused on self-care, and they're exercising like crazy and reaping the benefits of that extra energy, that extra resilience. So very good. I think I've talked about what I want to talk about with that subject. There's another thing that I've been thinking about lately, and I think I'll just touch on it briefly. It has to do with relationships. And I know that relationships are really critical to one's happiness. I know that intimacy and connection are really essential. Now, in relationships, there also is a similar thing where it's like the Pareto rule, where there's like an 80-20 ratio between what's effective and ineffective. I think that when it comes to relationships, the most important relationship is the relationship you have with yourself. My guess is that when it comes to happy relationships, 80% of your focus, or 80% of the potential for happiness in a relationship is derived from the view that you have of yourself. the relationship you have with yourself. And the other 20% is the relationship you have with another. So here's what I think is the key to happy relationships. I think the key to happy relationships has to do with the continual expression of appreciation for another person. That's it's the continual expression of appreciation, and also basically having no expectations about what you might be receiving from the other person. If you can sort of have a relationship where you continually express appreciation and at the same time have no expectations for the other person's behavior, then you've basically done all you can do to facilitate a happy relationship with another person. Yeah. Happy relationships are all about people want to be appreciated. And there are, of course, there's a book that I'm thinking about right now called The 5 Love Languages. And, while that's kind of important, I do also think of it as it's kind of pseudoscience, but I appreciate it. I think it's that idea of a love language is interesting and can be useful. Though I think that mostly it's important to express appreciation. I mean, for the things that you have the sort of capability of, for things that are essential to you. It's kind of interesting. I'm noticing something about the way I'm speaking now. It's a little disorganized. And, that may have to do with the extemporaneous nature of this presentation. It's kind of interesting. I'm noticing that some days I'm more fluent than other days. Anyway, let me get back to the topic at hand, and that is relationships. I think the key to relationships is really just expressing appreciation and having as little expectation as possible. And I think that that's mostly present in friendships. That's the kind of relationship where that's really possible, where there really is no expectation of what the other person really ought to be doing. And I think friendships can be more healthy than romantic relationships. The problem with romantic relationships is, once you get involved romantically with someone, then quite often there are expectations about how the other person is to be behaving. There's sort of an overlay of expectations on the relationship, and there's certain rules that we try to abide by. For example, I don't know, it depends. It goes, the different expectations differ for the different relationships. Some relationships, I don't know, it's easy to lose yourself in relationships, or at least it's easy for me to lose myself in a relationship, because I get focused, instead of on my own goals, my own personal goals, I get focused on the pair goals, right? The partnership goals. And that's great. It's wonderful to have those partnership goals and do things together and work together to achieve partnership goals, like travel and work and money and even social goals, developing friendships for the partnership and things like that. And I actually personally, I tend to get wrapped up in a lot of those relationship goals, and I kind of lose myself quite often. It's very easy for me to take the attention off my own personal development goals. And that's actually part of the reason I've been leaning toward sort of widening my circle of friends lately and deepening my friendships, because I'm realizing that, 80% of relationship success has to do with myself, and my relationship with myself, and how I talk with myself, and self-empathy and things like that. Anyway, so I was thinking that we can move on to something else. I was thinking that I've got this textbook called Philosophy, The Power of Ideas, and I figured that I would take some time out and just read a passage. How about let's talk about egoism today. And I'll just start here on page 250 of this book. There are two types of egoism. First, there is descriptive egoism, the doctrine that in all conscious action you seek to promote your self-interest above all else. Then there is prescriptive egoism, the doctrine that in all conscious action you ought to seek your self-interests above all else. The Epicurean ethical philosophy, for example, was a version of prescriptive egoism. Often, beginning philosophy students accept descriptive egoism as almost self-evidently true. Many also favor prescriptive egoism as an ethical philosophy. Of course, we always act to further our own ends, and that is exactly what we ought to do, right? But some philosophers see a difficulty in accepting both prescriptive and descriptive egoism, and that it seems trivial or pointless to tell people they ought to do what they think they are going to do anyway. That is like advising someone he or she has a moral obligation to obey the laws of physics, or to remain visible at all times, or to occupy space, they say. A further comment: if you find yourself subscribing to prescriptive egoism, one ought to seek one's self-interest above all else, as many do, then you should consider this. Does it make sense for you to advocate your own egoistic philosophy? If you ought to seek your own self-interest above all else, as prescriptive egoism says, then should you really go around telling others to seek their self-interest above all else? Is telling them that in your best interest? Might it not be better for your interest to urge others to promote the common good? That's a funny idea. So, I think that people do attempt to act in their own self-interest. I also think that people quite often are mistaken about what is in their self-interest all the time. So people are not perfect rational actors, in other words. And this can be seen in business, finances. People often don't make decisions that are in their best interest. And but I think that people do try to make decisions in their own best interest. People make decisions in their own best interest as they see their interests, and those interests, or as they see their values. Interests can be described as values. And I think that people are always doing the best they can. I think that is probably self-evidently true. One of the facts is that a lot of values that people pursue are at loggerheads. That is, they're incompatible. For example, in a relationship, I might be very interested in having security, and I hope that my partner offers me security. But at the same time, there are certain days that I'm interested in excitement and adventure. And so, how do I square these two needs? I have a need for security and a need for adventure. And, how do I satisfy both these needs at the same time? And I might, you know, it might be in my rational interest to satisfy the needs of safety more often than adventure. Um, but it depends on what opportunities arise and how I'm feeling in the moment and the choices I make in the context that I'm in. And that's the thing about being a human being, is that it's not an equation. In mathematics, we can optimize functions in the problem space, right? But human life, human decision making is not that precise. There are a lot of competing values, and there's scarcity of time, scarcity of energy, and human beings, we do the best we can with the resources we have available. And so I don't necessarily think that human beings act in their self-interests, their long-term self-interests, all the time. In fact, I think that, well, that's definitely not the truth, not true. Now, this idea of prescriptive egoism, I don't know. I'm not really into creating duties. I'm not necessarily into believing that there's a legitimacy to duty ethics and creating, say, moral imperatives about how people ought to act. I think I'm more comfortable just describing how people act. When it comes to the is-ought distinction, I recognize the continuous validity of just how things are and how it's really tough to be prescriptive. Ought is really just about when a person is trying to sort of emphasize the duties that they have or other people have. I think what a person is really describing is just their wants and needs and desires, and they're using a voice that is sort of like from a higher perspective voice when they talk about it or describe what they desire. There's sort of like this voice in language that is from a godly perspective, from a godlike perspective, where there are these proclamations from on high describing what ought to be true, like this whole idea of a prescriptive egoism, like that people ought to act in their own best interests. I mean, what's the voice in the language that's saying that people ought to behave in their own self-interest? It's like this third party voice that's coming down describing what ought to be true. And that is a fantasy. There's just you and there's me in the present moment, and we're behaving the way we're behaving. And sure, maybe it makes sense for us to behave to sort of want to behave in a certain way or desire to behave in a certain way. Anyway, I guess what I'm saying is that it's a trick of language. Sometimes when people talk about duty ethics, I think it's a trick of language. There really is no third party overarching perspective that exists. There's just you and me, and what we want, what we desire, what we dream, and what we think would be nice in the moment. The duties from on high are a fantasy. Okay, well, let's do some question and answer period. Let's do some questions and answers. Okay. Okay. So this is question number 56. How many hours a week do you watch TV? Is that too little, too much, or just enough? All right. I don't watch television. I don't have a television set. Now, I do watch YouTube. I watch YouTube videos. And I think I probably watch a lot of YouTube. Is it too little or too much? It's probably too much. I think what I would like to do is spend more time reading. Yeah. And why would I say that? It's really easy to sit back and just receive information from a television screen. And reading is a lot more active. Also listening to podcasts or audiobooks probably would be a better choice than watching YouTube. I don't know. I have been thinking about doing a better job reading more often. I'm kind of on winter vacation now, winter break, and I read more during the school semester because I'm studying for my exams or doing my homework. And actually I do a lot of reading at work, and I always have my Kindle beside me and a magazine that I'm toting around in my book bag. So I always have access to reading materials. For some reason, there's just something more stimulating about the video streaming. I'm not quite sure what it is. Anyway, I am glad, though, that I don't have television per se, because I think that television is, well, it can set you up to low quality programming, to watching low quality programming. I think it's important to get the highest quality programming that you can receive, because I think it's important just to continuously be receiving information that is that bears on your interests and your values. Next question. Question number 57. What's your favorite kind of candy? Well, when I was growing up, my favorite candy was Spree, which is like a hard candy in like tablet form. And then another candy that I really liked was Tangy Taffy. They don't make Tangy Taffy anymore. It was a sour taffy. And I particularly liked grape and cherry and strawberry. Those are definitely my favorite candies. And today, believe it or not, the kind of candy that I crave the most is chocolate chip cookies and frosting, cake and frosting, mostly just the frosting. So, in fact, I have it in my mind today. Last night, I put it on my shopping list to get some chocolate chip cookies. I'm going to get some Mrs. Fields chocolate chip cookies soon. And also, next time I go to an amusement park, say this coming Saturday, when I plan to go to Six Flags Magic Mountain, I think I'm going to try to get some kind of cake with frosting on it to celebrate. Here's the reason why I am enjoying going to amusement parks on the weekends. And the reason is because I do a lot of walking. And because I do a lot of walking, I burn a lot of calories. I probably burn a good 700 extra calories than I do in a normal day. And what that means is that I get to eat 700 more calories of food on those days. And so I often get excited about the extra 700 calories that I get to eat. And I'll choose to have a dessert. Maybe I'll have some chocolate or something like that, food that I don't normally eat, because, I know that I'll be burning it off that day. And that's pretty nice. So what other kinds of candy do I like? Well, I'll tell you, when I was growing up, I enjoyed lots of candy. One of my favorite candies was the Three Musketeers candy bar. I love those Three Musketeers candy bars. I never really got into Snickers. My dad, Ben Trujillo, was really into Snickers. I never did quite care for them that much. But I could understand and appreciate why those were enjoyable. Another candy bar that I really liked were Paydays. Paydays are candy bars that have lots of peanuts covering them, and that was great. I also liked bubblegum. Bubblegum was great. I especially liked Bubble Yum Watermelon. That's one of my favorite candies, my favorite bubblegums. Um, I also like red licorice. That was good stuff. I've got a lot of good memories about licorice and cotton candy. I like jelly beans. Those were great, of course. Yeah. And I also liked the butterscotch hard candies. Those were quite good. And I have a lot of interesting memories. I like shakes, chocolate and vanilla milkshakes. I've tried butterscotch shakes, which are really good. There were some shakes that were not good. Let me tell you, like McDonald's, every St. Patrick's Day used to have these shamrock shakes, these green tinted shakes. They were mint, I guess, vanilla mint shakes. Not good. I never really did like those very much. Um, let's see, what else? Oh, you know what kind of candy bar I really liked? I liked Mounds. I did not care for the Almond Joy. Mounds candy bars, if you're familiar with Mounds, Mounds has a coconut center and it's covered with dark chocolate. And those are really good. One thing I found about Mounds is that there was not a lot of candy bar in those candy bars. They were very light. There were only 2 pieces in a Mounds candy bar. And the thing about the Almond Joy is I didn't really care for the texture of having almonds around. Now there were some candies that I really enjoyed having nuts and eating nuts in, and that was um, oh yeah, the M&Ms, peanut M&Ms. Now we're talking. Peanut M&Ms, those are fantastic. I still love peanut M&Ms. And in fact, recently I noticed that M&Ms they're marketing a new variety. They are M&Ms with a caramel inside, a caramel center. Wow. I might have to give those a try one of these days. We'll see. And anyway, see, what other kind of candies do I really like? I know what kind of candies I used to enjoy when I was a kid. Like there were these apple pops. They were like triangular shaped apple pops. Those were good. Oh, I also like the hot tamales. Essentially, they were cinnamon flavored jelly beans. And those hot tamales were pretty amazing. Love that stuff. And I also really liked for a long time these cinnamon toothpicks. Yeah, I love that cinnamon oil on a toothpick. And I know that I think there was a time that I even tried to make cinnamon toothpicks. They can be really good. That's really enjoyable. Let's see, what else did I enjoy? What kind of candies did I enjoy when I was growing up? There were so many. um, Big Hunk. I remember enjoying Big Hunk. You may not even be aware of Big Hunk, but Big Hunk were these large, um, they're sort of a white candy bar, and they're sort of like, I guess what I'd call a toffee or a nougat. And I just like the big hunks for a little while. Oh, and Butterfingers. Big fan of Butterfingers. I haven't had a Butterfinger in a long, long time. Long, long time since I've had a Butterfinger. And you know what? I'm also a really big fan of peanut butter flavored candy or peanut butter cookies. Anything with peanut butter in it is really good. I even like regular peanut butter. To me, that's just as good as candy. Yeah. I really love, like, although, you know what, there's some fake peanut butters, like the Reese's peanut butter cups. Not my cup of tea. I never really did get into that, mainly because the peanut butter flavor isn't very strong. And it was kind of fake feeling, you know? I don't know. Maybe they've improved the peanut butter flavor in the Reese's peanut butter cups. One cookie that I really liked were the Nutter Butter cookies. Those were great. Those Nutter Butters. Oh man, they're still making them. In fact, a lot of the cookies that I grew up on are still made. Like Chips Ahoy, chocolate chip cookies. I never really did care for those chocolate chip cookies that much. And then there are these Keebler soft batch cookies. I remember when they first came out. These are the soft chocolate chip cookies. I can remember eating a lot of the the Keebler soft batch chocolate chip cookies. Dang. A cookie that played a big role in my life growing up was Fig Bars or Fig Newtons. My mom liked Fig Newtons. I love Fig Newtons too. They were fantastic. And now they've got all kinds of flavors. They've got fig flavor and strawberry flavor. And I think they've got other flavors too. They may even have like a grape flavor. I'm not sure. But Fig Newtons, they're the way to go. I was also a big fan. My mom was a big fan of Nilla wafers. And I'm not so much into Nilla wafers anymore. But there was a time I was. Graham crackers. Now that's a cookie right there. I used to make graham cracker cereal by taking some graham crackers and then crushing them into a bowl and then pouring milk over the graham crackers. Very quickly, those graham crackers would get soggy and would make just an amazing cereal. Amazing soft cereal. It was so good. I have lots of good memories of that. In fact, just thinking about that is getting me interested in perhaps getting some graham crackers and making myself some graham cracker cereal. That's for sure. Let's see. As for cereals, growing up, believe it or not, I had lots of Cheerios. I had lots of shredded wheat growing up. I had lots of Total and Raisin Bran. Lots of cereals like that. Mom did not buy the family the very sugary cereals, though she did buy some, like the Super Sugar Crisps. She would buy those every once in a while. And I'm serious, before that box got from the store to home, pretty much that box was already eaten. Because as kids, I think part of what my mom did at least once or twice was she would give us the box of cereal as a way to just keep us calm, I suppose, on the road. And we would just reach into the box of Super Sugar Crisps and just pound the Super Sugar Crisp without milk. Let me tell you, that stuff is so good. Yeah. And I have good memories of Super Sugar Crisp when I was growing up. That's for sure. That sure was a really great tasting cereal. And to know that they're still out there, it's amazing. There are a lot of products that just have a lot of resilience. They're time tested and quite good. What other cereals? I think I grew up, I had a lot of Grape Nuts. I think my mom liked grape nuts a lot, and so we had grape nut cereal. I think my mom did her best to eat healthy, right? And she tried to prepare foods in the kitchen that her children would appreciate and enjoy, and that were as healthy as she could make them. You know, it's tough when you're taking care of 6 kids. There's just, you want to give them all the benefits of pleasurable eating that you can. But I have a feeling that we ate a lot of food growing up. And mom prepared a lot of that food. My mom spent a lot of time in the kitchen. Some of the staples that we had in our household were tacos. We had stuffed green bell peppers. We had enchiladas on many occasions. We also had like spaghetti, and we had pozole, and we had, lasagna and stroganoff, beef stroganoff. We had that a lot growing up. And I also had a lot of pizza growing up too. I especially remember the pizza because I liked going to the pizza restaurants and playing video games. That was a big part of my childhood. Really love that. I certainly love back in the day, my favorite pizza was Godfather's Pizza in Taos, New Mexico, and in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I have recently been back to Godfather's Pizza. I went about 2 years ago, and I found that the pizza is totally different today. It's just totally different. There's no connection between the pizza that existed 20 years ago and the pizza of today at the Godfather's restaurant. I guess they changed their food selection. Anyway, so let's go on and move on to the next question, I suppose, because I'm moving a little bit too far afield. All right, next question. Question number 58. What's your strongest sense? Well, I think my strongest sense is my ability to see, mainly because, I spend a lot of time thinking about what's going on in my visual field. My weakest sense, I think, is my sense of smell. I don't necessarily think that I have a good sense of smell. I don't think it's necessarily a very sensitive sense. And I'm okay with that. I'm able to live my life with not a very strong sense of smell. And the reason why I think that my sense of smell isn't very sensitive is because one thing I notice is that people around me pick up on scents and smells faster than I do. Quite often, I'm experiencing situations where other people are noticing smells before I do, and that has actually has been quite a common experience. And who knows? Maybe it's not the case. Maybe my sense of smell is just as acute and sensitive as everybody else's, and perhaps in my mind, I just don't put a lot of attention on that sense. And there may be nothing wrong with my olfactory organs. It may just have to be the amount of attention that I bring to the information I'm receiving from my olfactory organs, right? Then there are other senses like the sense of touch and sense of hearing and sense of taste. I think all those senses are pretty adequate. Definitely, though, it's my sense of sight, which is my most important sense, my most acute sense. It's also the sense that's also being assailed by old age. These days, I've got my share of presbyopia, right? So I'm having trouble looking at things close up. My close-up reading is suffering because of the aging eyeballs, my aging lenses in my eyeballs. They're getting more firm, harder to bend, and so I'm having to deal with that. And then I've been myopic for a long time. I think I got my first pair of glasses, prescription glasses, when I was maybe a sophomore or junior in high school, and I've ever since had that myopia and have had glasses, and I've only recently, I guess within the last 5 or 6 years, started wearing contacts. So, even though vision is one of my most powerful senses, it's also one has been suffering the most from old age and close-up work. So I try to keep my sense of vision as acute as possible. Next question. Well, you know what? I think I'm going to wrap up today's presentation now. So let me just say a few words, Emily. I hope you got some insight from what I had to say about the causes of happiness, where to focus your time and energy when it comes to happiness. Certainly, the psychology is important, and using cognitive behavioral therapy techniques is very useful. And also acceptance and commitment therapy techniques. Those are also highly regarded for me, from my perspective anyway. And then so long as you can get the energy you need to be optimistic through exercise and working out, and walking goes a long way, long walks, that goes a long way towards helping a person be happy. And sufficient exposure to bright sunlight, that is really bright light, so that you can stimulate that optic nerve of yours and avoid seasonal affective disorder. If you can get those things that are hard to come by in our society today because of how we're indoors a lot and we're so sedentary. If you can get that exercise, if you can get that sunlight, I think that you can be happy no matter what, right? My point was that happiness is not necessarily dependent on the external world and what events occur, because we give meaning to the external world, right? We're always projecting our internal material onto the external world. And if you can get a grasp on if you can make closer, if you can make available certain attitudes that are easy for you to express, and stick with those attitudes, that can go a long way towards helping you get happier. I hope you have a fantastic day today and a fantastic week. I am going to be going to Six Flags Magic Mountain this Saturday, and you're definitely invited to attend. Come along with me. Bring your mom. We'll go hit those roller coasters. I've got a real interest in conquering the biggest, baddest roller coasters. I've been really interested and stimulated by roller coasters lately. And if you have an interest in that area too, let's share it. I'd like to feed off your energy of enjoying roller coasters too. And you can feed off mine. And Six Flags is only 2 hours away. And so I'm super psyched about the whole thing, and really, truly, truly quite excited about it. I want you to know that I love you, that I cherish you. I love you just the way you are. There's no need for you to change. Clearly, my happiness is not dependent on my external world. My happiness is not dependent on whether you change or not. My happiness is completely in my hands. It's something I've been talking about for the last hour. So how can it be that what you do or say affects my happiness? It doesn't. My interest in you is determined and committed, and um, I ask you to act in ways that are natural and make sense to you. I want you to act in ways that build your ability to act autonomously and responsibly as you see it. And let's work together in our lives in partnership with one another. I have a real need or desire for mutuality in all my relationships, and let's work together, shoulder to shoulder, to deal with this thing we call life as we move through our lives on this planet Earth, hurtling through space, revolving around the sun every year. And I guess I'll talk to you later. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Peace.